The estate was silent that morning, too silent for a man about to get everything he ever fought for. Have you ever watched someone build an empire out of blood and silence, only to have it all come undone by one sound? A baby's cry that never came? That's where we begin. Seoul, South Korea. A city of neon lights, ancient temples, and secrets buried deeper than any grave. In the hills overlooking the Han River sat an estate so massive it looked more like a fortress than a home. Because that's exactly what it was. This was the home of Min-soo, 29 years old, and one of the most feared men in the underworld. Men older than his father bowed when he walked into a room. Governments pretended not to know his name, and rival syndicates whispered it like a curse. But power, as we're about to learn, doesn't protect you from the one thing you never saw coming. 3 months earlier, Min-soo had made a decision that would ripple across an ocean, from the marble hallways of Seoul to the sun-scorched streets of Atlanta, Georgia, the glittering skyline of Miami, Florida, and the quiet, dangerous corners of Los Angeles, California. 3 cities, 3 fronts of a war that had raged for over a decade between his family's syndicate and a rival empire built by the Castellano family. Blood had been spilled in all 3 states, brothers lost, fathers buried, and now, finally, peace was within reach, sealed not with a treaty, but with a wedding. Min-soo was to marry Isabella Castellano, the daughter of his family's oldest enemy. A marriage of convenience, a marriage of survival. Everyone said it was brilliant. Everyone said it would end the bloodshed for good. But here's a question for you. What happens when the man arranging peace between empires is quietly falling in love with someone the world doesn't even know exists? 6 months before the wedding, during a raid gone wrong in Los Angeles, Min-soo's men uncovered something they weren't prepared for. A newborn baby, abandoned in the aftermath of a rival hit. Her parents both casualties of a war that had nothing to do with her. Most men in Min-soo's position would have looked away, would have handed the situation to someone else, somewhere else, and moved on. Min-soo did not look away. He brought the child back to Seoul, quietly, no press, no family notified. Just an order to his most trusted men. Find her a home inside these walls, and find her someone who will actually care for her. That's how Jenny entered his life. Jenny was 25 years old, born and raised in Atlanta. The kind of woman who grew up folding laundry for tip money and reciting Bible verses her grandmother taught her before bed. She wasn't rich. She wasn't connected. She wasn't the kind of woman anyone expects to find inside a mafia boss's private estate. But she was patient. She was kind. And most importantly, she asked no questions. When Min-soo's men recruited her through a private nanny agency, promising triple the pay for discretion and long-term commitment, Jenny almost said no. Almost. But bills don't pay themselves, and her little brother's college tuition wasn't going to fund itself either. So she packed one suitcase, boarded a flight from Atlanta to Seoul, and walked into a world she couldn't have imagined in her wildest dreams. The first time Jenny met Min-soo, she had no idea who he was. She assumed he was just another wealthy businessman who traveled too much and trusted his staff with his secrets. Their first conversation was almost comedic in how mismatched they were. "You're late," she told him, arms crossed, baby monitor in hand, completely unbothered by the 2 armed guards standing behind him. Min-soo blinked. No one spoke to him like that. Not his lieutenants, not his own mother. "I'm never late," he replied coolly. "Well, the baby's schedule doesn't care about your ego. She's been fed, bathed, and put down for a nap, which you almost ruined by stomping in here in those ridiculous shoes." For the first time in longer than he could remember, Min-soo laughed. A real laugh, not the practiced smirk he gave at business meetings, but something unguarded, human. That was the moment, though neither of them knew it yet, when everything began to change. Isn't it strange how the people who challenge us the most are often the ones who end up meaning the most? Over the following weeks, something shifted. Min-soo, a man who trusted almost no one, found himself walking past the nursery more often than necessary, found himself asking his assistant for updates on the child's well-being, when really, he wanted updates on her. Jenny, for her part, began noticing things too. The way Min-soo's jaw would tighten every time he left for a business trip, the way he'd come back with faint bruises he tried to hide beneath tailored suits, the way, despite his cold reputation, he'd sit for hours at the nursery door just listening to the baby breathe, like it was the only sound in the world that made sense to him. She didn't know his world. Not really. But she knew pain when she saw it, and Min-soo carried it like a second skin. Have you ever met someone who seemed untouchable on the outside, but you could just tell something inside them was breaking quietly? That was Min-soo. Meanwhile, 3 states away, storm clouds were gathering that neither of them could see coming. In Miami, whispers began circulating among the Castellano family's inner circle. Isabella, the bride-to-be, wasn't as thrilled about this arranged marriage as she pretended to be in public. Behind closed doors, in encrypted phone calls to associates in Los Angeles, she made it clear she had no intention of sharing power with anyone, especially not a Korean syndicate she considered beneath her family's legacy. "He thinks this marriage secures peace," she said coldly to her cousin over a burner phone. "What it secures is control." "My control," her cousin chuckled darkly. "And the girl? The nanny?" Isabella's tone sharpened. "She's a variable, and I don't like variables, chills, right? Because we all know what happens to variables in stories like this one." Back in Seoul, oblivious to the storm brewing an ocean away, Min-soo and Jenny's bond kept deepening, not through grand romantic gestures, but through the small, quiet moments most people overlook. Like the night the baby wouldn't stop crying, and Jenny, exhausted after 18 hours on her feet, finally broke down in frustration. Min-soo, still in his tailored suit from a meeting that nearly turned violent, walked in without a word, picked up the baby, and began humming an old Korean lullaby his own mother used to sing to him. Jenny watched, stunned. "You sing? Only when no one's supposed to be listening," he said, the ghost of a smile on his lips. "Well, someone's listening now." For a moment, the war outside those walls didn't exist. For a moment, it was just the three of them, a mafia boss, a nanny from Atlanta, and a baby who belonged to neither of them by blood, but somehow belonged to both of them by choice. Now answer genuinely, is family only what we're born into, or is it what we choose to protect? As weeks turned into months, the wedding date crept closer, and with it, the tension inside Min-soo grew unbearable. He'd lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling of his massive bedroom, wondering how a marriage meant to bring peace could feel like the loneliest decision of his life. Jenny noticed the shift too. The late-night pacing, the clipped phone calls, the way he'd stare at her sometimes, like there was something he desperately wanted to say but never could. One evening, as they sat outside on the estate's balcony overlooking the city lights, Jenny finally asked a question that had been eating at her for weeks. "Do you love her, Isabella?" Min-soo was quiet for a long moment. "Love has nothing to do with it." "That's not an answer." He turned to look at her, something raw flickering behind his usually guarded eyes. "This marriage isn't about love, Jenny. It's about survival. Mine, my family's, hers. If I don't marry her, more people die. It's that simple. Nothing about this is simple," she whispered. And she was right, because 2 states away, in Los Angeles, Isabella's associates were already setting a plan into motion. One designed to eliminate the one variable standing quietly in the way of complete control. They just didn't know her name yet, but they would. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and make sure you hit that subscribe button. 3 days before the wedding, Min-soo received a phone call in the middle of the night. His personal assistant, a man who had served him faithfully for nearly a decade, hadn't checked in for his scheduled report. This wasn't unusual on its own, except the assistant handled all security logistics for the nursery wing. Something felt wrong. Min-soo tried calling him. No answer. He sent 2 of his most trusted men to search the estate's guest quarters, thinking maybe his assistant had simply overslept or was dealing with a personal matter. But when those men returned empty-handed, panic, something Min-soo hadn't felt in years, began creeping up his spine. He decided to search the guest wing himself. Now here's where fate, or maybe something crueler than fate, decided to intervene. In his haste, exhausted from 3 sleepless nights and consumed with dread over his missing assistant, Min-soo turned down the wrong hallway. He reached for what he believed was the guest room door. It wasn't. It was the nursery. And when that door creaked open, what he saw stopped his heart cold. Jenny was on the floor, not standing, not calmly rocking the baby like she always did. She was on her knees, sobbing so hard her entire body shook, cradling the baby in trembling arms like she was trying to hold together something that was already breaking apart. The baby wasn't crying. The baby wasn't making any sound at all. And the room that was always filled with soft humming or gentle lullabies, was eerily, terrifyingly silent. "Jenny." Min-soo's voice cracked in a way none of his enemies had ever heard. "Jenny, what happened?" She looked up at him, and in that single look, tear-streaked, hollow, terrified, Min-soo understood something with absolute certainty. This wasn't an accident. Someone had gotten inside his estate. Someone had gotten past his security. Someone had come for the one thing in this world he had quietly, desperately grown to love without ever admitting it out loud. And in that instant, standing in the doorway of a nursery he never meant to enter, Min-soo felt every wall he had built around his heart collapse at once. The wedding, the alliance, the years of careful political maneuvering to end a war that had already cost his family so much. None of it mattered anymore. Not against this. Not against the image of Jenny breaking on that floor, the baby motionless in her arms. Because here's the truth about men like Min-soo. They can survive betrayal. They can survive war. They can survive losing everything they've built. But they cannot survive watching someone they love shattered by a cruelty they failed to protect them from. Without another word, Min-soo turned and walked out of that nursery. His guards, waiting nervously in the hallway, barely had time to react before he issued the only order that mattered anymore. "Cancel the wedding, sir. Cancel it," he said again, voice low, deadly calm in the way that terrified even his most loyal men. "Whoever did this just declared war, and I intend to finish it. I need you to ask yourself something. What would you do if the person you loved was hurt by someone hiding in plain sight? Would you have canceled everything too? Comment below. I want to know, because what Min-soo didn't know yet, what none of them knew yet, was that the true mastermind behind this attack wasn't some outside enemy lurking in the shadows of Los Angeles or Miami. It was someone already inside these walls, someone he trusted. Someone who had access to the nursery, to the security logs, to Jenny's schedule, someone positioned perfectly to make this look like an outside job. And when the truth finally surfaced, it would shatter every remaining illusion Min-soo had about loyalty, love, and the price of peace. The baby was still breathing. Barely. Jenny hadn't slept in almost 48 hours, refusing to leave the child's side even as doctors flown in from Los Angeles fought to stabilize her. And Min-soo, the man once known only for his cold ruthlessness, sat outside that hospital room in Seoul, head in his hands, praying to a god he hadn't spoken to since childhood. Because somewhere between Atlanta, Miami, Los Angeles, and Seoul, between a war that spanned continents and a peace that was never meant to last, Min-soo had found something he never expected. Something worth losing an empire for. The truth arrived 3 days later, delivered not by enemies, but by silence. Min-soo should have noticed sooner. It wasn't Isabella. It was his own cousin, Tae-yang, a man raised alongside him, trusted with the estate's deepest secrets. Jealousy had rotted quietly beneath years of smiles. Jealousy over the empire Min-soo inherited, and jealousy over a nanny from Atlanta who had somehow softened a man everyone believed unbreakable. When Min-soo learned the truth, he didn't rage. He simply whispered, "You are family," before walking away, leaving Tae-yang to face consequences darker than any courtroom could offer. The baby survived. Jenny never left her side, and Min-soo, standing at a hospital window overlooking Seoul's skyline, finally understood what his father never taught him. Power protects territory, but love protects people. Weeks later, no wedding photos were taken with Isabella. Instead, a quiet ceremony joined 3 lives into one family, chosen, not arranged. Have you ever had someone teach you that real strength is knowing what's worth protecting? If this story moved you, tell me which moment hit hardest. Like, share, and hit that subscribe button, because love this fierce always finds its way home.